Hey guys, welcome back to Concordia Jedi for another tier list. This time I'll be covering the Battlefront 2 2017 heroes and where I think they fall on the tier list, as well as covering some of their strengths and weaknesses. This is mainly going to look at hero modes and not modes like Supremacy or Co-op. However, if I feel the hero has traits worth mentioning in those modes, I'll acknowledge it. But this ranking will be based off of how these heroes are against other heroes. Let's start off with the light side heroes. Starting off, we have Anakin Skywalker. Now, if you got angry at his placement on my Jedi tier list, don't worry. Anakin in Battlefront 2 goes into A tier. Now, Anakin was extremely OP at launch, and after several nerfs, he's a fairly balanced hero, even if his abilities glitch sometimes. Anakin is a very versatile hero in Battlefront 2. He's great in trooper modes where his abilities can absolutely decimate multiple troops at once, and in hero modes, his damage output and his ability combos make him a threat to nearly any opponent. That said, his stamina is fairly weak, especially if you run his massive strikes card like I do. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself in a very bad position against characters like Vader, Dooku, or Grievous. Anakin is best at countering blaster characters like Boba Fett, Iden, or Phasma. He's pretty decent in saber duels as his damage output is among the best in the game, and his force abilities are top tier. Anakin goes into A tier. Up next, ObiWan Kenobi. Obi-Wan is probably the safest hero for new players thanks to how forgiving his stats are. He has the highest stamina on the light side, and his health regen is the best in the game, especially when paired with his Jedi Resilience star card, which allows him to regenerate almost half of his total health. His abilities aren't the best, admittedly. His mind trick will slow down the enemy slightly and keep them from using their abilities for a short time. His defensive rush can block most damage while dealing damage if it hits the opponent. And his force push can send enemies flying if it hits. However, where Obi-Wan's strength truly lies is in how survivable he is. The amount of damage he can take and come back from is insane. In saber duels, Obi-Wan's best strategy is to play defensive to give you a chance to read your opponents and gradually increase the offense when your opponent is low on stamina, increasing the pressure until they break. His damage output is pretty average, but again, your strategy should not be primarily offensive based. Against most blaster heroes, especially Phasma, Obi-Wan's ungodly stamina can render a lone blaster helpless. If his mind trick takes away your abilities, those couple seconds are all he needs to take you out. He's best at countering saber heroes like Dooku, Maul, and Grievous. However, he struggles against enemies like Boba, who can stay out of his reach long enough to chip away at his health, Vader, cause it's Vader, and surprisingly, Kylo Ren. If you're playing too defensively as Obi-Wan, or if you waste all your abilities too quickly, a good Kylo can keep the pressure on and make short work of you with his frenzy and force abilities. With all that said, when you can learn to turn Obi-Wan's defensive capabilities into unrelenting offense, utilizing his top-tier stamina, mind trick, and push, Obi-Wan becomes nearly unkillable. Overall, Obi-Wan is an S tier. Up next, we have Yoda. Yoda is a very peculiar hero, in that there's two types of Yoda players. Players who spam the attack button and quickly get themselves killed, and players who will use Yoda's speed to break your ankles and cut you down in less than a minute, all while you struggle to land a single hit. Yoda is not the best saber character in the game, however, he is one of the most rewarding characters to master. Yoda is one of the faster heroes in the game, and utilizing his speed along with his dash strike will damage an enemy through their block, and it's crucial to winning. He has a unique force push that gains more power the more blaster shots or force abilities he blocks, and a well-timed push can make all the difference with Yoda. His damage output, while not the best, is more than enough when the enemy is struggling to catch you, especially if you run his opposing the dark side star card, where he does extra damage to enemy heroes. His bonus health ability not only grants Yoda and his teammates extra health for a period of time, but it can free Yoda from stun attacks like Vader's choke, Maul's throw, or Kylo's freeze. This not only makes Yoda decently survivable, but also makes him incredibly difficult to catch. He has some great star cards, including one that will replenish health for some of the damage prevented by his presence ability. The downside to Yoda is that while he's very fast on his feet, his lightsaber swing speed is the slowest in the game, and characters like Dooku, Vader, and Grievous can easily outdamage you before you know what happened. With that said, Yoda is a hard counter to Emperor Palpatine. Why? Because unlike other saber characters like Luke or Anakin or Obi-Wan, Yoda can absorb Palpatine's lightning without losing any stamina whatsoever. His bonus health ability pretty much negates Palpatine's dark aura and electrocute stun, and his speed is more than enough to catch even the most slippery of Palpatine players if you're careful. With all that said, I'm gonna put Yoda in low B tier. He's not the best choice in most situations, but if you can master him, he's a nightmare to the enemy. Now we move on to, in my opinion, the most slept-on saber character in the game, Rey. Rey is going into A tier. The main issue I see with many Rey players is that they get way too trigger-happy with her dash strike ability and don't know how to utilize the right star cards. Rey has overall decent stats for health, damage, speed, etc. But what makes Rey special is her star cards. Rey has an essential star card that gives her an extra dodge ability, essentially giving her the same mobility as Dooku in a duel. Her best ability, Insight, not only hides her from the enemy radar while revealing hidden enemies, but it replenishes her abilities faster and increases her damage output. One of her star cards increases the duration of Insight to nearly 30 seconds, which is absolutely broken. Combine this with star cards that boost the damage or damage reduction while using her dash strike, and Rey can be extremely unpredictable in a duel and, oddly enough, can be one of the better saber counters for characters like Vader in the right scenario. She's extremely mobile and, with proper star cards, her damage output is insane, especially when attacking the enemy from behind. Her main drawback is that while she's lethal up close, she has no ranged attacks, so characters like Maul, Boba Fett, or Palpatine can give you a good amount of trouble and keep you at a distance long enough to chip away at your health. Rey goes into A tier. Finally, we look at Luke Skywalker. And it's hard for me to say this, but I can't put Luke into S tier. Luke has the best speed of any light side hero, his abilities can be game-changing, and he's a reliable counter to nearly any enemy in the game. However, Luke is a bit of a glass cannon. He can deal a lot of damage in a short amount of time, but he can't take too much before he dies. His health regen speed is fantastic, but he can only regenerate so much health. His abilities can be easy to telegraph if you know what you're doing, much like Anakin, and all it takes for someone like Vader or Dooku to get the win is telegraphing his repulse ability properly to get Luke in a choke or stun, opening him up for serious damage. Now with that said, because Luke is so fast and because his abilities are great for knocking enemies to the ground, Luke is a very versatile hero to play as and is a good choice in almost any situation. On top of that, his Intensify star card will slowly build up his damage output with the amount of damage you deal or enemy troopers you kill, to the point where Luke will deal an extra 30 damage per strike to enemies. This means that Luke will be dealing 130 damage per strike to enemies when it's maxed out. To put that in perspective, a character like Boba Fett has 600 HP. This means that Luke will only have to land 5 strikes on a prone Boba Fett to kill him. Luke is definitely one of the best sabers on the light side, but not quite S tier. Now, on to the light side blaster heroes. Let's start with the undisputed GOAT of blaster heroes, Han Solo. Han is an easy S tier. His blaster has fantastic range and accuracy, incredible damage output, and his detonite charge ability and shoulder tackle can knock an enemy off their feet, opening them to a barrage of punishment. What really makes Han an S tier hero, however, is his Smuggler's Wit star card. This card gives Han a third roll to get away from damage. Utilizing this is absolutely critical when facing enemies like Vader and Grievous. In fact, Han is the only blaster hero in the game who can reliably give Vader massive amounts of trouble because of how slippery he can be. The key to winning with Han is to maintain enough distance to stay safe from saber damage while being close enough to use his abilities properly. Keep the pressure on and don't let up. Now, there are characters that can give Han trouble. One character that Han struggles against is, of course, Vader. Han may be decently good at outlasting Vader, but if Vader gets you in a choke, you're guaranteed to lose a good portion of your health. And he doesn't have much to spare at only 650 HP. Kylo is, fittingly enough, also a danger to Han, as Kylo's pull and freeze combo will leave Han unable to counter the fast damage that Kylo can put out in a short time. And oddly enough, BB-9E can be a major headache to a Han as well, as he's such a small target and his shock spin ability will disable Han's blaster for a few seconds. With all that said, Han is by far the best blaster on the light side, and arguably the best blaster in the game, S tier. On to Han's best buddy, Chewbacca. Chewbacca is a difficult character to master, but when you do, you become a damage machine. With the highest base health for a blaster hero, Chewie can take a good amount of damage before you need to back up and recover. His abilities include a shock grenade, which stuns the opponent and can be upgraded with star cards, Ground Slam, which knocks a prone opponent off their feet, and his best ability, Furious Bowcaster. Chewie's Bowcaster deals great damage at a slow rate, but the benefit is that the shots still damage an opponent through their block. When Furious Bowcaster is enabled, Chewbacca can fire his bowcaster at a much faster rate for a few seconds and deal extra damage. If combined with his other abilities, Chewbacca can bring even a full-carded Vader to half health in a few seconds. The downside to Chewie is that he's fairly slow, and his bowcaster shots are relatively easy to dodge. And if you can avoid his shock grenade and ground slam, he's pretty much an open target. Chewie goes into B tier. Up next, Leia Organa. Leia is going to have to go into A tier. Her thermal detonators are great for taking away chunks of an opponent's health, and her shield not only heals, but protects against most damage, which can be crucial when facing a team of blasters. Her best ability, however, is her E11. This is a fully automatic blaster that will decimate anyone in a couple of seconds if they aren't careful. If you're a Palpatine and you see Leia pull out the E11, say your prayers because you're pretty much toast. This gun has a decently long time where you can fire, so it's not like Han's rapid shot where it's gone in a few seconds. It also has fantastic range. As for her standard weapon, it's decent, and the charge shot can do some serious damage at long range or short range. But the major downside to Leia is that she has a decent number of enemy heroes that can counter her. Vader because, say it with me, it's Vader. Kylo because of his pull and freeze ability, and Boba Fett whose concussion missile can get rid of her E11, leaving her open to damage. However, Leia can absolutely melt the stamina of heroes like Grievous, Maul, and Dooku, and as long as she maintains her distance before putting the pressure on, she's a great pick. A tier. Up next, Lando Calrissian. It hurts me to say this because Lando is one of my favorite blaster heroes in the game, but Lando is going into C tier. Lando's blaster doesn't do a whole lot of damage, and there aren't any star cards that boost it in any meaningful ways. His smoke bomb ability is pretty much useless if you're playing against an experienced player, and his sharp shot ability is only really good if the enemy is distracted. His best ability is his stun device, which, when thrown, has to be activated, which can be useful in sticky situations, and if you can land your headshots when they're stunned, you'll do some decent damage. But Lando is not the best choice in most situations. The only heroes Lando is consistently good at dealing with are Boba Fett and Grievous because of Grievous' low stamina against blasters. But a Vader, Kylo, and Maul can all easily dispatch of a Lando, especially if he doesn't have his stun ability. Lando is great in trooper modes because his sharp shot can lock onto multiple enemies, but against heroes, Lando is a C tier. Up next, we have FN2187, aka Finn. In trooper modes, Finn is pretty broken. With the right card setup, expect to get at least 80 kills just with Finn. In hero modes, it's tricky. Finn has no knockdown abilities or stun abilities. All you can do is shoot. Against a Vader, you're dead. Against a Kylo, dead. In any 1v1 against a Saber, you're almost guaranteed to lose. However, Finn is going into B tier, because in Heroes vs. Villains, if your team is coordinated, Finn's abilities make it so that not only do your teammates get some health back, but their abilities replenish at a faster rate. So you'll basically just be bullying the other team, especially if they keep charging you at a disadvantage. And this isn't even mentioning the invincible Anakin glitch you can do with Finn, which if you do this, know that you are a cheater and God hates you. But Finn, not great in Showdown or 1v1s. In Heroes vs. Villains, solid pick. Finally, we have BB-8, and this little guy is going into B tier. Why is the droid so high, you may ask? Because you can't frickin' catch the little guy. BB-8 is the most evasive monster on the game. His health regen is on par with Kenobi with the right star cards, his cable spin will melt you and it lasts forever, and his headbutt is surprisingly lethal. I've seen max level Vaders fall to a level 50 BB-8. I've seen him wipe squads off the map when they're distracted. And he's the character who Vader's choke is the most unreliable against. Half the time, it just won't work. Now, the only reason he's not higher is because he has no real ranged attacks, so he's useless at a distance. He can't defend himself, so you can't take much damage before you die. And if you're going up against a camping Phasma or a Bosk, your chances of winning are slim. But BB-8's mortal enemy is Palpatine. All Palpatine has to do is stay out of reach and fry BB-8 from a distance, and the droid can do nothing about it. Outside of that, BB-8 is a very solid choice for making your opponents think you're going to be an easy kill. B tier. Now, onto the dark side. Starting off with Vader. S tier. Do I really need to explain it? Vader is hands down the most overpowered character in the game, even without star cards like bonus health or punishing grip. He deals the most damage with basic attacks, his saber throw only has a 7-second cooldown, his focused rage ability boosts all his stats for a time, and his choke is basically like pressing the win button. Vader has no one true counter in the game. The only character that truly comes close to being a counter is Obi-Wan because of his high stamina, great health regen, and his mind trick ability. The only true downside to Vader outside of being one of the slower heroes is that his stamina regen is probably the worst in the game. So if you're fighting a Vader who can't conserve stamina, you might have a shot. But Vader is S tier. Up next, we have Kylo Ren. Kylo is going into B tier. Kylo is kind of like the dark side Luke in this game. Good speed, decent health, and good abilities. However, Kylo has some upsides that set him apart. For one, both his freeze and his pull can be used in midair, making him unpredictable if you know how to bait your opponent in. His frenzy ability has a very fast cooldown time, and it's essential for dealing extra damage or finishing off a stubborn opponent who's on their last sliver of HP. Against blaster heroes, Kylo is a great choice. Not only can he bring the fight over to him with his pull, but when followed up with a freeze, a few backslashes, and a frenzy, they're done for. However, Kylo does have two major weaknesses. Number one, the cooldown on his freeze and his pull abilities are by far some of the slowest in the game. If you waste them, you're going to be treading water for a little while before you can use them again. Number two, Kylo's frenzy can be countered by not only every lightsaber hero, but also Han, Chewie, BB-8, and Lando. All the saber heroes can knock Lando out of his frenzy with a push, a pull, or by knocking him out of it like Rey with her dash strike, or BB-8 with his headbutt. Han's detonite charge and Chewie's slam can knock him out of it, and if timed properly, Lando can stun him before any real damage is done. So the problem with most Kylo players is being too aggressive right out of the gate, and they waste their abilities and poop the bed when they get knocked out of their frenzy. Still, Kylo does a good deal of damage with his basic attacks, his star cards can increase his frenzy damage as well as the reach and damage of his pull, so he makes it into B tier because when played right, Kylo can take you down very fast. Do not underestimate him. Up next, Darth Maul. Maul goes into B tier. Darth Maul is the opposite of Vader. Maul's attacks aren't very strong, but they're fast. Maul is very fast and agile, but his resistance to damage is pretty bad. Vader will hit you 3 times like a semi-truck and kill you. Maul will hit you 7 times like a moped. The key to playing Maul in any scenario is to only use your abilities when you need to. Do not spam your spin attack. Use it to your advantage. Because Maul is so fast, he's very good at pulling off sneaky attacks that are too fast to properly defend against. With Maul, distance is key. Not too close, not too far. Maintain just enough distance to cause damage while being far enough away to get the opponent to push you head on and throw caution to the wind. His choke throw ability is great for maps with ledges if you prefer to win the cheap way. His saber throw is even faster than Vader's, and the damage can be increased with a star card. And his spin attack is great not only for causing damage, but also for parrying and getting out of tricky spots where you might be surrounded. Just like Maul, you have to be a survivor and strike when they least expect it. Because of Maul's average health, his main counters are characters like Anakin, Chewbacca, and Han Solo. Characters that can not only attack from a distance, but also deal massive damage in seconds. However, Maul is very good at dealing with characters like Rey because of Rey's lack of ranged attacks, Leia as long as you can avoid her E11, and Lando as long as you avoid his stun. B tier. Up next, Count Dooku. S tier. Dooku is probably the single best choice for a one-on-one duel. He is made for dueling and little else. His health is very good and can be bolstered with his Sith Control star card, his attacks are fast and do very good damage, especially when they hit from behind, and his lightning stun can be very difficult to predict and will knock an opponent off their feet. He has an ability called Expose Weakness that not only slows down enemies, but also makes them even more prone to damage. If that's not enough, it also removes bonus health from characters like Yoda and Finn. Dooku's best ability, however, is Duelist. This not only increases Dooku's attack speed, giving him the fastest attacks of any saber for a brief period, but it increases his attack damage, meaning all it takes is a few quick attacks to secure victory. He also has 3 dashes, making him difficult to catch and to predict. Combine these with the right star cards, and you'll be sporting that signature look of superiority. The downside to Dooku is that his stamina is not the greatest unless you have the Finesse star card equipped, and because his only ranged attack has a very short range, Dooku is very susceptible to blaster characters like Han, Chewie, Leia, and even a good Lando. Now sure, if you get in close with duelists, you can make quick work of them, but that's tricky to do when you're being shot at. However, Dooku is still S tier because in most cases as Dooku, you won't have to worry about blasters if you can creep up while staying behind cover. Dooku goes into S tier. The final dark side saber hero, General Grievous, and I'm gonna put him in A tier. Now, I main Grievous on the dark side, and he's an absolute unit when it comes to dealing with saber heroes, and he has by far the most OP star card setup, with beating heart and flesh is weak, which give him extra health regen and stacking damage resistance respectively. His saber damage is already great, but when combined with the Sith trained star card, you can take out a full health Luke in just a few slashes. His abilities are Claw Rush, which is great for making a quick escape when you're low on stamina or health, and for knocking enemies off their feet. Unrelenting Advance, which is pretty useless in most scenarios unless you're out of stamina and defending against blasters, and Thrust Surge, which has a great range and sends you flying sabers first at your target. You may be thinking, if Grievous is so great, why isn't he in S tier? Simple. His stamina is balls, especially against blasters. 2 or 3 shots from a blaster and your stamina is toast. No joke. A good Leia on an open map is a Grievous main's worst nightmare. She will melt you in seconds and you can do nothing but run. His Claw Rush can also be cancelled by Han's Detonite charge, and while the jump slash is pretty devastating, it's pretty easy to see it coming. Not to mention his Thrust Surge is useless if you're fighting a seasoned player, since it's easy to parry. Grievous main counters are Leia, Han, and Obi-Wan. However, Grievous is fantastic at dealing with characters like Yoda, Anakin, and low-level Reys. Grievous is fantastic and he is my main, but his weaknesses keep him from S tier. Now on to Papa Palpatine. Palpatine is going into B tier. Just like Lando, Palpatine is one of the most fun characters to play as. His lightning, while not insanely powerful, has great reach and will melt stamina quickly. His chain lightning can hit multiple targets at once, and his dark aura is great for chasing down low health opponents and sapping the HP from them as they desperately try to run and regain health. For a decrepit old man, he's also surprisingly agile, with a very fast recharge rate for his dashes. Palpatine's main drawback is that he has no way to block attacks, so blaster characters are a major hazard to Palpatine, meaning you're going to have to be moving constantly and dodge a lot to avoid much damage. Again, most players who try Palpatine make the mistake of using only one hand to shock and not utilizing his ability and mobility. Against blasters, your best strategy is to get close to them to hit them with the lightning while dashing around them faster than they can target you. Keeping this pressure on will quickly drain their health, and it won't be long before they start running and you can finish them off. Palpatine's biggest counters are the blaster characters, primarily Han and Leia, Anakin because of Anakin's ability to yank people out of the air, and Yoda. Yoda can absorb Palpatine's lightning without losing any stamina, meaning that it's nearly impossible to do any lasting damage to Yoda as Palpatine. Characters Palpatine is great at countering, however, are BB-8 as mentioned before, and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan can only really deal with Palpatine at close range. His only ranged attack will push Palpatine away, giving Palpatine the distance he needs to recover. And by dodging Obi-Wan's push and keeping constant pressure on, Obi-Wan will inevitably start to panic and either run away or swing for the fences, leaving him open to damage. Palpatine's main advantages are his agility and his range of attack. Use those to your advantage. Moving on to the blaster heroes, starting with the bane of my existence, Boba Fett. I'm going to get this out of the way right now. If you main Boba Fett, you enjoy riding bicycles without a seat. That's just a fact. I don't make the rules. You enjoy that. That said, Boba goes into A tier. Boba has lower than average health, a decently powerful gun, and one ability that is good. Boba's first ability is his concussion missile, which in most cases is pretty useless. It'll obscure the enemy's vision for a few seconds and deactivate blasters for a moment, but it does 0 damage. His next ability is Rocket Barrage, which can do insane damage if all the rockets hit. However, it's difficult unless you get up close. But this leads to Boba's best ability and ties into why he's an A tier. Boba's jetpack can get him out of danger in seconds, and by the time you catch up with him, he's already regained his fuel and had a cup of coffee. His best ability, For the Hunt, not only reveals enemies on the map and hides him from enemy radar, but it gives him about 8 full seconds to fly without burning any fuel. He's by far the most difficult character to catch. Especially because, in my experience, Boba Fett's don't want to fight you. They want to annoy you and keep you distracted so that Vader can come in and do the hard work for them. And if they're all alone, they'll just fly up to a high point on the map and emote on you because they know you can't reach them. Then, if you decide to not engage and just hide inside where Boba is at a severe disadvantage, they'll message you about how you're a coward for not fighting, all the while they're situated up on planet Mars hiding from you. Now, as annoying as Boba Fett is, and as much damage as he can dish out, he is far from invincible. Anakin is a prime counter for Boba Fett, as you can just grab that emoting bastard from midair and kill him in a couple swings. And if you don't kill him, don't worry, he'll keep his distance from you because of strategy, not because he's Blaster characters like Han and Leia are also great counters because they can hit Boba at any range and deal a lot of damage in seconds. Leia's shield will also protect you, as if Boba wants to fight, he's got to get inside the bubble. The best blaster counters for Fett, however, are Chewbacca and Finn. Chewie's bowcaster will knock Fett out of the air if he's flying, and if you can land a stun, all it takes is a couple headshots to send him to space hell where he belongs. As for Finn, his Deadeye will lock onto Fett while he's flying and deal a lot of damage very fast, meaning his only choice is to hide behind cover. Fett is good at dealing with most enemies, but there's no one character he truly counters outside of maybe BB-8 and possibly Rey. And even then, if you're on a map with ledges, Rey can mind trick Fett and make him waste fuel as he flies over the edge and plummets to his death. Boba goes into A tier. Up next, we have Bossk. Bossk goes into B tier. Bossk is a very unique hero. He's the only character in the game who can regen all his health no matter how much damage has been dealt to him. His proximity mines are extremely dangerous, and when combined with his Dioxis bomb, your health will be gone in seconds if you're not careful. His best ability is Predator Instincts, which allows you to see enemies through walls and obstacles and fire grenades from your gun for a short time. Bossk's main strategy is to camp. If he has to move, he's not moving far. Only far enough to bait you into his bombs. He has the highest jump of any blaster hero excluding Palpatine or Fett, and because of this, he's very slippery. But again, he's not invincible. Anakin once again is a prime counter. If you see Bossk hiding behind his bombs, pull him away and end him. And if you do get stuck in his bombs, hold down your heroic might before they go off, and they'll do almost no lasting damage to you. Han and Chewie are also great counters, but Anakin is by far the most consistent. Bossk is best in HVV when your team can protect you from being targeted, and the one character he counters best is BB-8 because of his lack of range. He can deal a ton of damage very fast, but he can't take a whole lot without hiding to regenerate. B tier. Up next, Captain Phasma. Phasma is going to join Lando in C tier. Much like Bossk, Phasma is a camper, which is why when you come across two dick nozzles in Hero Showdown playing Bossk and Phasma, it's best just to leave. They don't want to fight you, they just want to camp. Phasma's best ability is her droid turret, which she can place down nearly anywhere on a flat surface. The turret will not only shoot at enemies, but stun you if you try to get in too close, opening you to a lot of damage. Her second best ability is Survivor, which gives her some bonus health and damage reduction. Her weakest ability is her Staff Strike, which is only really useful up close. Phasma's gun has a very fast rate of fire and decent range, and also has a thermal scope that can reveal enemies on the map. However, unlike Bossk, Phasma can only damage you if you're close enough. If you decide to ignore her and go after her teammates, she'll be forced to go after on foot. If she does, any good Saber character can take her out fast. She has decently high health, so it's a bit harder for blaster characters to deal with her, but because she'll usually be camping around her sentry, she won't be moving too far, and enough damage will leave her shaking in her shiny pants. Phasma is good at countering characters like BB-8 and Lando because of BB-8's lack of range and Lando's lower damage output, but she's weak to most sabers and blasters. C tier. Up next, Iden Versio. Iden goes into A tier. Iden is probably the most well-rounded blaster hero in the game. She's absolutely lethal at any range, and her abilities complement that playstyle. Is your enemy camping from far away? Switch to your sniper and get some good headshots. Are you trying to push a blaster hero but don't want to take a ton of damage? Pop your shield. Is that pesky Luke getting a bit close for comfort? Shock him with the stun droid and unload a couple clips into his skull. And if your opponent is low on health, spam some nuclear blueberries and finish him off. Iden is best played in either a one-on-one situation or with a team. It's best to hang back at first. Wait for the enemy to get cocky and try to push. Do some damage while they're running towards you. If they're smart, they'll back off to regain their health. giving you enough time to regenerate your abilities. If they're stupid, they'll push you head on, and by the time the stun droid gets them, that health is going from 300 to 0 in a few seconds. That said, Iden is reliant on her abilities and distance. If she doesn't have her abilities, she's pretty much dead in the water. The enemies Iden struggles with the most are Obi-Wan because he can negate her abilities and his higher health is a problem, Anakin because he can pull her and destroy her quickly, and Leia because of her shield and E11. Iden has no one character that she perfectly counters, although she can be a danger to Anakin if the Iden is fast and smart enough to dodge his Force abilities, leaving him helpless, as well as Obi-Wan from a distance due to his Force push being his only ranged attack. A tier. Finally, we have BB-9E, who's going into D tier. By far the weakest hero in the game. His damage output is pitiful, his abilities are really only useful for keeping enemies at bay, and his star cards are not great for most situations. With that said, if you come across someone with a high-level BB-9E, or God forbid a max-level BB-9E, run for higher ground. You will lose if you try to face him head-on. Unlike BB-8, BB-9E's shock attack will actually stun you in place, not only leaving you prone to damage from other players, but also giving him a chance to dodge around you before you can hit him. The goal with BB-9E is just to piss off the enemy, and on a blue moon, when the stars align just right, you'll find an enemy so enraged and focused on killing you, they completely ignore their health meter and realize all too late that while they were swinging for the fences, you were sapping the life out of them. BB-9E's best ability is his shock spin, which not only deactivates enemy blasters briefly, but will send the opponent flying backwards, which is great on maps with a lot of pitfalls like Kashyyyk, Bespin, or Naboo. His passive ability is that when he's in close proximity to an ally, he will slowly heal them, and his back to support ability slightly boosts this while also removing the cooldown on enemy blasters for a brief time, letting them shoot for longer. Heroes to watch out for BB-9E are Luke, because of his speed, Leia because her E11 will melt you in 2 seconds, Finn because his Deadeye will lock onto you and because of your lack of range, he'll have no trouble hitting you. But your biggest threat as BB-9E is Obi-Wan. Why? Let's say you pop your shock spin ability on Obi-Wan, but he blocks it. If he mind tricks you while you're in the shock spin animation, you won't be able to dodge or move for several seconds, and he'll kill you in that time. Enemies BB-9E is good at countering are Anakin because of Anakin's slower swing speed, and because his abilities can easily be dodged by BB-9E, and Chewbacca because of Chewie's slow rate of fire, and if he does use his Furious Bowcaster, you can remove it with the shock spin. When it comes to playing as BB-9E, don't try to be a hero. In modes like HVV, your job is to provide support and to stun. Stick to your teammates. In a 1v1 against a Saber, keep dashing through them and around them, all while stunning them. Be as evasive as possible. If you're getting overwhelmed, pop the shock spin and go regain. If you're nearby a ledge, pop the smoke screen and obscure yourself. Try to get behind them and send them over the ledge. BB-9E is strictly for team players and high-level trolls. D tier. And that's about all you need to know about the heroes in Battlefront 2 and where they go in my ranking. Any hero can be S tier in the right hands, but just based off my experiences, this is the most approximate ranking. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you around.